we'll get started. Oh my gosh, Gwendolyn Kennedy is here. What a great, is a young lady that is amazing. I'm so glad she's joined the room. She has, in my neighborhood, grew up here. I know her mama. So great to see her. Jen Strozer. Jen, not enough of seeing us today. We've been, Fennell and the team has been organizing, as people may know, the midterms are a big deal in Virginia, and we are going to do the Yes campaign. But I'm glad to see everybody now really flown in the room. You're on the Armchair Pundits, and I want to get this started saying, Fennell, I don't know about you, but today probably was one of the most sickest days where my belly hurt really all day. And the only time I had relief was when I was in the room with a bunch of activists trying to plan and got my mind off of it. So tell me what you're thinking. What's on your mind, friend?
Well, I will say it's been a really, really tough weekend. But I'm okay. As tough as the weekend has been, though, to your point about being in the room with people who are feeling what we're feeling, I will tell you, I was having a conversation with my friend Mary Rarick on sometime on Saturday, and she was telling me that her attorney general, who she thinks is amazing, had a town hall call with like 20 other attorney generals. And they were all having this conversation about the work that they're doing.
Right,
And one of the things that her attorney general said is to know the difference between thunder and lightning because one of them doesn't hurt you. And so when we think about all of the things that are bombarding us, it might be loud noise like thunder, but thunder doesn't hurt you. Lightning does. And so it just helps us to think about how we're going to focus our attention. It may be a lot coming at you, but know where to focus your energies on
yeah,
the lightning and not necessarily the thunder.
I know. And we know we've seen a lot of lightning these last couple of days. So I want to talk to you about that. I mean, I know that watching what has happened in Minnesota and Minneapolis in general, watching Alex Preddy's life just be unalived and murdered, execution style. There is a point where I know you're affected. And today, when I wrote the title, what we wanted to talk about, silence is permission. No one could say I didn't know. So let's talk about how in this moment in history, this isn't like aberrant. It's not like this is not when people say, oh, this isn't who we are. I think that it's about time we face and look in the mirror, like your article said. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I've been really struggling with how to think about
yeah,
this moment and how I'm thinking about this moment. And not with the complexity that maybe a lot of other people have, but
right,
just simplistically how I think about it with the things that I know. And I also think about the fact that I think we do let people off too easily
right,
because we'll say we want to give them an off ramp. And giving someone an off ramp is not the same thing as being completely honest about what we're seeing and what's happening.
right,
And so I sort of go back to a story to think about how do people actually see themselves today and how do we talk about it in ways that are really, really uncomfortable about making people look at who they are. So I did this article and it was called, your reflection in the mirror, and just sort of looking back historically about where people would be based on the kinds of decisions and the things that they're doing today. And I always talk about Mary Turner because it's probably one of the most graphic and
it
one of
is,
the most startling stories that I have ever heard or ever read about how someone was treated. And I wonder, based on the cruelty of that she was treated, and looking at what's happening in Minnesota, where would Christy Nome be? Where would JD Vance and where would Trump be? And all of these folks, would they have been out there just, reveling in that moment of this horrible cruelty? Or would they, would the rest of the folks just be sort of silent and not saying anything? And either one of those things is unacceptable. The other example I think about is little Ruby Bridges, who would be 70. She's 71 right now. She's born in 1954. But when you think about that little 6-year-old girl going to school with the four marshals around her, these people who we call our Republican neighbors today who are watching what's happening in Minnesota, if you went back to when Ruby Bridges was in school, would they have been out there with that, throwing rocks and throwing slurs at this little 6-year-old girl?
Right.
Is that who they would be? And if they weren't that, would they just be at home silent, not saying anything? So I think it's time that Republicans, disengaged people, take a really good hard look in the mirror to see, even back then, based on what's happening today, it is a reflection of who we are and who they are. And we should tell them that, and we should stop coddling them and
Ooh,
make people be accountable for what they're doing or not doing.
I want to talk about that word coddle because that's it just, it's true what you were talking about. No more coddling. And we've been coddling the America, I think, since time started. You talk about the story of Mary Turner, 1918. They murdered this woman, executed her. She was pregnant. They had the day before hung her husband. And just because she spoke out, this is what they're able to do to her. And what I think you made a really great analogy with is the terror is what it was about, right? It was for people to look upon this horror and say, this could happen to you, or this is what we'll do to you. So shut up. So I really equate that to what we're seeing right now with when they're trying to, the same brutal people. And you're talking about who is basically the same people,
Yeah.
those same people that did that to this woman, this African American woman, are the same people that are on behind these masks right now, because it's the same movement, and we have to understand it. It's in our genies, as my dad liked to say. I know we don't want to admit it, but it's in our genies, and that means that it's part of us, and we have to figure out how to extricate this part of what. When we say, what is America about? Well, damn, we better take a hard look in the mirror, because these ICE agents are the same white supremacists back then, using the same tactics. And trust me, when Kristi Noem comes out and on her placard it says, one of us, all of you, that's Nazi rhetoric shit. So
Yeah.
they're watching history, and so
Yeah.
should we.
So let me just say
No?
this to you. So just think about what's happening in Minnesota. Think
Yes.
about the language that people are using. And so on Good Friday in 1963, 8 white clergymen published an open letter in Birmingham in the news talking about the extreme measures that Dr. King was using. And they said that, and we know it was peaceful, but they said that it was inciting hatred and violence. That is exactly the same thing that Kristi Noem is saying on TV right now. What's different though is, and what I'm seeing positively now, is Dr. King fired back at them and said, "An extremist? Well, are you extremist for hate or are you extremist for good?" So what he said was he just leaned right in. And that's what it's time for us to do. It's time for us to start leaning into those friends and neighbors and those people who would give you the shirts off their backs. But at the same
Wait a
time
minute.
now,
To do what? Ring you up to get you. Here's a shirt to cover you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I told
Yeah,
you
yeah, I
today,
hear
shirt
you.
to show you that. But
Exactly.
but my point is
Right.
that it is time for us to not coddle
Yeah.
them.
No more
To
cuddling.
not just say, "Oh, we don't want to hurt their feelings because if you do that, they just turn off." No, what we should say is, "Hey, so tell me how you're thinking about what you're seeing. Tell me. Ask them and say, well, that was really similar to what happened in history. How do you think you would have felt about that then?
Right,
I mean, what do you think you would have done?" It is time for us to start asking them the hard questions. And I do think that, when some of these things are happening, like Republicans in red states,
right,
in my view, in my little head, what I think about is this. Yes, you should run everywhere because it gives an opportunity for the world to see what kind of state you are. Are you a state that wants to be a state that says billionaires get to pay, whatever they don't want to pay in taxes? Are you a state that says poor people should not have any opportunities? Are you a state that says voting rights shouldn't be available to anyone? Are you a state that says it's okay to have mass people run around, put people in concentration camps? Are you we can go down the list. Are you a state to say that people should not have Medicaid and care and medicine? If you are that state, then the world should see who you are. And Republicans, Democrats running everywhere have the opportunity to shout that out loud. And we may be surprised that
right.
there are more people who are exhausted, more people who are confused, more people who simply don't know. Because if you're watching Fox News today, you are not having the conversation that we're having right now.
Yeah, it's somebody was just saying, turn the, they were actually talking about that, turn Fox News the hell off and really wake up. Well, it reminded me of Medgar Evers. We just talked about that when you talked about 1963. If people remember, like you said, Martin Luther King led this peace movement with the clergy. And what's interesting, and again, we see in Minnesota, which folks, if everybody listening in here, it's a litmus test. It's a testing ground. And we know that because in Virginia, we were a testing ground for a lot of CRT with Youngkin, the DEI. We understood they were sort of testing their racist words here. They see if they can win. Now they're testing how we're going to respond in Minnesota. And what's great to see is the clergy, that the 100 clergy that flew there and then we're praying the Lord's Prayer. I could tell you on my Facebook that got the most look at, and because they were praying on their knees and being arrested, and they were calling attention to it. And clergy are now saying we got to put our bodies on the line. And back then, and just similar, do you remember the activists that went to the church in Minnesota, where there was this church where the pastor is associated with the ICE agent. So people went in there and they actually prayed and they were there for a while. And then they disrupted, let's just call it, the service. And it was interesting to see the MAGA right go wild about this. Like, oh, this person was just murdered over here. But my God, it's like that when we said the fuck word would get them going, that they went into a church service and they spoke up and called these people out, that they were not worshiping and acting like the values that Jesus promoted and King promoted and other justice people promoted. And it reminds me of the hypocrisy of it all, but that's the point. But I think we're at that inflection point right now. We have clergy. We are seeing it. More people are seeing it. So let's say that, and the bullshit lying that people can see now, they're really, I think, in a mode where they're just lying to see what happens next. But Greg Bovino, bold-faced bullshit incoming liar, Kristi Noem, same thing. We have the video.
Yeah, we do, and our job is to make sure that that video goes everywhere, and
Yes.
so sometimes you'll have to actually put it in a text message. You should send it to every single Republican that you know. I do think it's time to start, writing, the op-eds where you can get them in, where they really are starting to make visible, what people are seeing, because we have to stop this assumption that everybody sees all of these things that are happening. Now, some of these things that are going viral, like this video is, and I love the way that some of the folks on TV are actually stopping it and slowing it down so that you can see.
Yeah.
And it'll be hard for people to say that it's okay. But I wanted to point out one other thing in terms of the cruelty.
Right.
I was looking at something last week, and there was a person who was on the ground, and the ICE agent was just literally spraying a chemical in their eyes. The person's already down, hands are down, and they're literally just spraying a chemical in their eyes. And you have to wonder the cruelty of the kind of person that actually does something like that. The 5-year-old Liam. People have to start seeing this stuff and being accountable, because they are. They are accountable. If this is either what people hate is being called a racist. You either are or you aren't.
Yeah, I think, well, and this is the part when we're looking at all the parts, and there's so many moving parts. And I'll say that a couple weeks ago, I know James Waukesha, our congressperson, went to Minnesota. And when we had Simon on the show on Friday, we really talked about, and I really agree with his idea of coming together. When we talk about strategies for full force reaction, is one, to keep continuing, show the truth, push the truth, stop the coddling, and also looking at, like, the leadership. Again, we always like to say, okay, we know that it's up to the people, but we really want to see strong leaders unify and do more, like really show that force of power and almost make a parallel government, and as we say, because a couple cracks in the FBI, if you remember, in that shooting, not the shooting, but the Renee Good case, the year as an agent then quit because this was in the civil rights area of the FBI, because they pressured her to close the case because she wanted to open up the civil rights case. And they wanted her to instead make the case against Renee Good. So, this judge would not sign the warrant for this to happen. And so what you see is some of this being pushed back. We see judges acting, we see clergy acting, and we just got to really, we need more of that. But let's talk about the media real quick, because the Washington Post today, I went nuts around this today. I really lost my mind. The Washington Post on the front page posted Minnesota shooting sparks protests. DHS man killed Saturday had gun. And the whole article was about how he had a gun. It was word for word from the government propaganda on the front page. So anybody reading this is not going to get the true story. This was propaganda. So let's talk about, like, when we talk about the media, eh,
Yeah,
how do we hold these people accountable? This was
well,
crazy to me. It made me crazy
it
today.
it it does make you crazy. Well, this goes right back to, propaganda, right? That,
Yeah,
we've talked about this many times before. So I think the point is, and continues to be, is that we are trusted people
right,
who will give facts to our friends and family and neighbors. We are gonna be some of those trusted resources. And
right,
I do think that it's important, to push back on the Washington Post. That may be a place where someone writes an op-ed back to the Washington Post to say, "You did this article, and here's what you said, and here." I mean, it's the same thing. We have to think about these things differently. I do, in fact, believe that there is work for the grassroots, but I also believe that the DCCC and that they all have DNC, that they all have work to do too, in terms of really having a narrative and carrying it forth.
right.
If they believe all the things that they said about fascism and propaganda and all of those things, then I want to see a team working on that. I want to see
Yeah,
them pushing back on that. We can do what we can do, but it would be so much more effective with the giant narrative and people like us and others understanding what is happening. It is not just about affordability.
no,
Affordability doesn't happen in a fascist government. It has to happen in a democracy. And I do think they must do a better job of creating the narrative of where we are. You can't just say it during an election and then throw the word out without actually tying and
I'm
connecting it
gonna be honest
together.
with you. I don't know how everybody else feels listening. I don't see our party, the DNC, much doing what I like to see them doing. What we saw is 7 people vote for the funding bill. Some of those people we actually helped get elected. For those of us really sick about that too, I know I made a call to Tom Swazi. We helped elect this guy. We helped elect Vidman and Suhas, and they voted for this Reich and Reich. Uh, Riley Act. And I think a lot of times we have to, it is something. Let's just talk activist talk. We know in election time, we need to vote good candidates. They can get elected in their area. And people will say, vote blue no matter who. And Robin and I had a discussion about this today. And I think you have to take it at one piece at a time. Yeah, you need to vote, you need to elect people that will get elected. But we have to hold these people accountable. We can't just walk away. And I think Tom Swazi needs to know that this is a moral time. And you're either going to understand, if you vote for these monsters, there ain't going to be any election that we can think of. You have to get to your voters and explain that you cannot kill Americans in the street. That's unacceptable, and I'm not voting for it. You tell me how hard that is. I mean, you tell me that you're so worried about getting elected that you can't go to your constituents and say, "I care about the border. I understand about security, but my God, we do it this way in America. We are this, this, and that." You can't do that. Come on now. I mean, this is what I call weakness.
Yeah, so let me say
That's
this.
one-pointed, but I tell you, it's a problem when we need our party right now to stand up, and we can't
So
operate in a vacuum.
Okay, so Catherine,
So tell me
this is
how.
what I'm gonna say about this is what I'm gonna say about that. It will never, ever be all or nothing, that it's
I
always
know.
okay to vote blue no matter who. So let me just tell you how I think about that. Every situation has to be looked at. So if you just think about the election of 2024, this is to me the perfect example
Okay.
of folks who stayed home because
Yeah.
Kamala Harris wasn't perfect. She didn't do this. She didn't say genocide. She didn't, whatever the thing was that she didn't do. So voters stayed home. And so my question is that when you decide that you're going to make a decision like that, understand that there are consequences. No candidate is ever going to be perfect and do every
Yeah.
single thing that we want to do. We do have an obligation to hold them accountable. But my question is, for those people who stayed home in 2024, I would just say, did it get better? Do you have the ability to talk to an administration that's actually even gonna listen to you?
Right.
Or did it get worse? And so my point is that you can't just strategically tell people that I didn't get the person that I wanted, or the person didn't do everything I wanted, and if I don't get these 5 things, I'm not supporting this person. If it if that happened, we wouldn't have a democracy. So that's what a democracy is. So I just say
I
people have to make their own decision. We have to hold them accountable the best we can, but there is always a consequence for every one of those actions.
I agree. I know. I see some people. Jane was talking about the DNC decided not to share the 2024 election. I know that the autopsy on that, and sometimes Jane in our work, we just know we just got to keep moving on because, yeah, it's really, as we say, up to us. But back to
I
that,
mean, do you really need an autopsy, or do you really know what
you
happened?
know
I
what
don't really
happened,
need an
right?
autopsy.
You know what happened.
I can pretty much figure out what happened. We
Yeah,
we
that
lost,
body's
but
dead. Hold on, that body's dead. That's what happened. We know. But I'm going to say, just to push back a little bit, is that yes, but right now in this moment, you just said about the DNC and all this stuff in our party, and they should be doing this and that. But at the same time, these people voted let's just say, to fund this killing machine. You would think there all these people who are in this room up there would be get together and say, we are in damn trouble. Greenland, NATO, Davos, craziness. We saw a crazy man. He has the codes to nuclear shit, right? This is bigger than just one race, one man, one vote, one person. This is about an American. And this monster has been with us since we were born, let's just say. Like I said, it was in our genies. And I think if you were just sitting there looking at one vote and thinking about yourself and not everybody in the room going, how are we going to come out strong? Because we are in deep doo doo here, and we just saw people get murdered, and we can't play around. It's time to go strong because what's the plan? I just don't see it moving forward where they're thinking.
yeah.
So I'll just say that because I just feel like again,
Well, here's the idea. Those 7 people in this moment right now, in many cases, perhaps I hope, people have the opportunity to primary them.
well, we
Pe
talk.
people have
Well,
Yeah, people have the opportunity to do that because, like I said, people are never gonna do everything that we wanna do. Yes, I would certainly hope the DNC, or that the DCCC would have had a big conversation to decide how they were gonna carry these votes, because it's what I've already said. We are in this moment that is existential. But do I feel like everybody is acting like it's existential? No. When I go to the grocery store, when I go out to the store and buy something, if I go on a vacation, I don't feel like I'm acting like it's existential. I have a deep guilt about that, but I know we're supposed to calm down and have a little joy and a little bit of that. But when your house is burning down, ain't no joy in that.
no, and I think we're making an assumption that there is going to be the time to primary. All these we're so Democrats. What we do, we just rely on the norms of what we think is our problem solving technique. Well, when we're mad, we primary. When we do this, we go here. And I think I'm just challenging all of us to say we have to think differently. And I want to circle back as we end out this conversation because I think we could talk all day about the election stuff, but I think we all get it here in this room. Our biggest enemy, and I think when I say enemy, is the millions of white evangelical churches that when we say the white supremacy is coming, it's here. We see that a lot of this cover that the churches have given this movement, and that's obviously the next phase of this. And I think when we go back in history, we talked about it earlier, when we looked in 1845, where the white Southern church broke from the Northern brothers and sisters because they disagreed with how Jesus was going to kind of lead them. And they were saying, you need to be more like, we need to end slavery. We need to care for the immigrant. And they're like, no, man, we're not. And so many years later, we had the Civil War. But the church is really facilitating this. And I think when we say silence, complicity, we need to speak up against, the church that's the white supremacists behind this. These are the J.D. Vances. This is the big part of the movement. And Pete Hegseth, we all know, is part of this misogynistic, vulgar, disgusting branch using this Jesus that Martin Luther King knew a whole different way. So I'm thinking
Well,
we need to call these people out.
yeah. So we can make it really complicated, or
Okay,
we can make it really, or we can make it really simple. And in my mind, making it really simple is what you just said, which is what I've been saying, and that is to tell people to their faces who they are,
yeah,
and let them tell
zero.
you why. To let them tell you why it's different. And I think I want to call out Republicans in a much different,
Right.
deeper way because they are harming everybody. It doesn't matter what color you are. I mean, they'll harm me more and people who look like me more, but they're harming everybody because they don't particularly care for poor people either. They just drag you along and tell
Yeah,
you that you're better and that you're going to do stuff, but they're gonna drag you too at the end of the day. So I think our goal is to do what has been done in history, which is to just make this stuff as visible as possible. Do what Dr. King did and talk back to them. What he did back in 1963 may not sound the same today, but that's what he did. He called them out, and we must call them out. We don't have time to coddle people. We
mm-mm,
only have time to tell them who they are and give them an opportunity to do something different. And there must be a narrative created about how to do that, not just for Republicans,
right.
but for people who are disengaged, who stayed home, who are too busy, or who thought they didn't matter.
No,
They have to be part of this too.
no, I agree. And, I just want to say, Chef reminded me that the Catholics have been doing some troublemaking too. And I agree. Thank God Pope Leo is up there speaking and taking on. And I think those challenges to the faithful will make some differences. But to your point, when we want to close up on how we started on history, learning from it, the life of Mary Turner, and now we see the other folks that have been brutally assaulted as a lesson to us that what will happen to us. And, we see the ICE officers telling people, protesters, or even regular citizens, did you just see what happened? It's going to happen to you. So we have reached a scale where we really are in really scary territory. So,
Yeah,
we really have to adjust to that. And we have to think going forward, you know, those tactics. When we look in Virginia, one of them is the midterms and our Yes campaign, right? We're going to focus on talking to voters because we can move a ball this way, our election ball. Then we could move our protest arm and how we show up for each other. So we're going to have many tools that we use on our norms of elections, continue in that, continue in our protest mode and showing up mode, and new things more now. And it was Chef and some other people struggling to talk to people. It's time to really say to people, what side are you on? And I think it's really, like you said, kind of that simple.
yeah. Uh, uh, yeah, I would say that it is really about holding them accountable and and
Right.
and being clear about who they are and letting them decide who they are. I do think in terms of the Yes campaign
For the
that
yes,
that
explain what that is.
yeah, so this is this opportunity that we're going to take to redistrict the way that we need to in Virginia. And so that is gonna be a lot of work, but we can't lose sight of how we need people to understand that campaign. There'll be more to follow on that, but it is a whole story. It really is a story about where we're going. It is a story about deciding how we fight, and so we'll decide how we'll
Like,
fight. We'll choose the people who are gonna carry those values and fight for us, and then we're gonna go and save the world with the general election.
oh, oh,
We'll have to talk about it holistically, but I think
I
at the
know.
end of the day yeah.
I'm all excited because
Uh,
I'm just thinking we're gonna have to carry mirrors with this when we see Republicans. One, we could find out, are they vampires just right away? And two,
uh,
look, like Don Scott, our leader, said when they were talking about this redistricting and the say yes stuff, he's like, give me a break. Don't lecture me. And me, Sia Price, our delegate, the same thing. Give me a break. Don't lecture us. We are going to use every tool in our toolbox. And I think one thing that, like I said, what helps us and gives us one thing to keep us saying is to work on what we can do right now in the campaign. And the other is, again, meeting weekly, talking, talking to each other, staying in unity. Oh, and I see Gwendolyn. What about showing up in our communities too? Volunteering, making connections, working with abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood, partnering with shelters. Very good point. I think 100%, Gwendolyn, is that part of the movement is, why don't you just say it? You always say what Linda Horsham says about going door to door. Why don't you just
Yes.
put the
So
send on there? I don't
yeah,
want
yeah, so
the
so
whole
so
date
so
at 7:30.
yeah, so I'll say that Linda Hersham, one of the things she says is, talk, knock, talk and knock far and wide, which is really, she says that you have to evangelize. But part of it also is really every bit of support that we do in our communities and also supporting Minnesota so that people understand it. And there have been information about the kinds of things that you can do for Minnesota, even from afar. But I want to end by just saying where I started, and that is know the difference between thunder and lightning. And we may be in a lightning phase right now in terms of some of the things that we're seeing, but there is an awful lot of noise. But we keep ourselves sane when we know the difference between thunder and lightning. One of them is just noise, and the other one will hurt you. And so that will just sort of keep our mentality, keep us mentally strong about understanding how some of these things that we feel really, really bad about, but it's not going to hurt us today. But
Yeah,
just stay focused.
yeah.
There's a difference.
I think we're moved to a next level and a level up, and I think it's something that, when we talk about Mary Turner and the history that Black people are real aware of and white people are waking up to it. They're like, "What? Yes, you see the signals, you know what's happening. This is history repeating itself." And that we know, that when people say, "Well, this isn't America," and we're like, "Hey, yeah, it could be." And with that, we're so glad that people joined us tonight. It means
Me too.
community, and I'll say that we yeah, it really's been, you can't imagine how much more you can take. Our prayers, and I mean this when I think about Alex Preddy and his parents and how he talked about their son in the ICU unit with veterans. This is the man that they took out and the man they tried to defame, and I would say that, these are the people in history that we'll remember, and we have to carry forward the good side of who we are in America to make it's our country and to fight for it. And that means some people are obviously have been killed already for it. So I think that today I'd like to just really have him on my heart, his parents on our heart, his family, and Renee Good, and really Liam, the little kids that are in these detention facilities that I think make all of us. And this is the stuff we can show people. This is where we can go into churches and go into the community. Is this who you are? Look in the mirror. Okay. And I know who you are, and I'm so glad we're friends, and I'm so
Yeah, me
we'll
too.
do the Armchair Pundits and on Friday Power Lunch, if you can join us, you can watch the recording too. We're gonna have a great story about Indiana. We're gonna have for Mad Voters talking about how they did beat back the Trump MAGA in that district to sort of take control of their state. And we're hoping James Walkinshaw will join us to talk about how we do fight back and how he is going to he's joined that fight already. And so we hope you join will join us Friday. So with that said, last word.
Goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
I
Tell
thank you,
everybody and join
everybody.
us next Sunday.
Yeah, no, when you tell people silence is what? Permission,
Simplicity and permission.
complicity, and permission. So let's get noisy. Bye.